I'm the director here, and we have about 1,000 people joining us some part of today. And if you're new to the conference and this is your first time here, welcome. We're so glad to have you with us. Before we get started with anything else, I want to invite Katie Spring, who is a friend, a devoted NOFA member, and an incredible farmer up in Worcester, to the stage to share a poem she wrote. Okay, let's give it up for Katie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to Grace and all of the NOFA folks for having me up here. I'm going to share a poem called Gather Together, and it comes from when I was a beginning farmer, and we had set our sights on doing all the things for all the people, and within the first couple of years realized that's really not a sustainable thing. So it helped us focus what we were growing and what we were offering. And I ended up writing this poem just this past spring. And when I saw the NOFA conference theme, it felt really like it fit really well. So this is called Gather Together. I don't want to be self-sufficient anymore. How exhausting. Here, let us sow seeds together, intertwine our roots, carry the bucket, hand in hand together, as in to gather, as in community. Let us lighten each other's loads. Remember, we were made for this. And you can all take this poem home. It's in the NOFA Winter Conference guide booklet, so you can all take it home and gather with others too.
We're so lucky to have so many poets and song leaders and artists, as well as farmers in this membership. So thank you for all you're bringing to this movement. I've been thinking a lot, and folks who are just coming in, we still do have some rows that have seats up front, so come on up. It's nice to have people cozy in here. I've been thinking a lot about what to say to everyone this morning, and how to welcome you appropriately in this moment. And thinking about standing here this morning, I thought back to standing at this podium last year. And I was remembering how raw we all were from that first round of really record flooding. I remembered also the deep feeling of the power of how much this community had come together last year. How we had really shown up for one another. And that feeling of support, solidarity, trust, that we were going to be there for each other when it mattered. And then I thought back to the conference the year before, when the one and only Winona LaDuke was here. And yeah, shout out to Winona LaDuke. And she made us all laugh really hard. And when we were laughing, she asked us to have the courage of a feisty grandma with grandbabies to protect. She told us to take courage and to be the ancestors our descendants would thank. I thought a year back again, when Niaz Dory, longtime leader of food sovereignty work, yes, shout out to Niaz, led this whole room in a collective exercise of writing a declaration of interdependence. I thought back even to those challenging years before, in the thick of the early pandemic, when Indigenous leader Sherry Mitchell spoke to us remotely on Zoom, and she said, Mother Earth is our first teacher. She has informed us that oneness does not equal sameness. She shows us this through the harmonious balance that is held in the rich biodiversity that exists within our world. To achieve oneness, we have to transcend our differences, knowing that all healthy systems are comprised of complexity and abundance of diversity. Coming to this moment, the conference on this wheel of our year, I can hear again this clarity of the messages of years past coming before. And I'm remembering that we kind of already know what we need to do. As Wendell Berry says, and we pray, not for new earth or new heaven, but to be quiet in heart and an eye clear. What we need is here. Certainly for me, but I think for many of us, this conference is a ritual. It is one of the most important rituals in my year, a place where I can remember what I value and who I am together with you all as a community. Francis Weller is one of my teachers, and he explains that ritual is able to hold the long discarded shards of our stories and make them whole again. Ritual has the strength and elasticity to contain what we cannot contain on our own and what we cannot face in solitude. I admit, there are moments lately I have felt and I've heard from a lot of folks in the membership who feel a lot of grief or overwhelm right now. But Francis also teaches me that grief and love are sisters. Any grief we feel is the flip side of profound love for each other and for our place. And where there's love, there is always a way forward. And there is always love, because the earth endlessly gives to us, so ready to forgive, to collaborate, to flourish, even now. The years from these conferences past still feel really true today. Have courage, tend community, laugh though you've considered all the facts, tend resilience through mutual collaboration with the earth and with each other. Be profoundly committed to diversity, for that is the full flourishing of life. And of course, always lay a feast table so laden with bounty that it's going to bow with the weight. As Robin Wall Kimmerer says, I've long believed that the ones who have more joy will win. And I would add to that, the ones who have more snacks. So this year, I add my question. Can this conference offer us all a ritual space to hold together what we can't face alone? Our theme this year is growing together. And at this moment, it feels like a lot is coming apart at the seams. Can today be a community quilting bee? A place where we lay the pieces we carry onto a big table and together patch those small offerings onto our neighbors' offerings, restitching those shards of our stories together again, maybe to make something like a quilt that can keep us all warm. In that spirit, I'd love you to meet the person sitting next to you. Perhaps you get bonus points if you don't already know each other. So find someone that you don't know or you didn't come with and introduce yourself, say where you're coming from, and maybe one thing you're excited to do today. And we're gonna take 30 seconds and I'll call you back. Go to the hospitality table, get some cheese, follow up on your conversation, stand in the hallway, We're gonna have spaces. There's an ice cream social at the end of the day. Do not miss. Stratford Farm will be scooping their own ice cream. It's a whole thing. Coming together allows us to reconnect and to imagine in ways that are not possible alone. The challenges that we're facing right now are not individual issues. It's not your problem or my problem. It's all of our problems and all of our solutions. And when we come together, we have what Dr. Keltner, Joe Boston, shout out to our board member who sent me this, calls collective effervescence. This idea that when we come together, new ideas emerge that we can't expect and we can't anticipate. And speaking of that thinking collectively, I do want to remind you that NOFA Vermont is a membership organization. Can you put your hand up if you are a NOFA member? Okay, nice. Thank you. Our members are our heart. Our members are farmers, gardeners, folks who rely on farmers, which is all of us, farm workers, engaged leaders, everybody who believes that a better food and farming system is possible. You're helping us build an agricultural movement that's rooted in people, in land, and in justice. Thank you for being a part of this community. Your participation really does add power and momentum towards this shared vision where Vermont is home to thriving farms and agriculturally rooted communities that support the long-term well-being of the earth and all its people. That's what we're up to. If you're not a member yet, do consider joining us. We are building power and we're growing in membership. We have many hundreds more members this year than we had last, and we'd like to keep that momentum going. 2 years ago, we won almost $7 million for organic dairy relief that went to keep farms in business. Last year, your collective generosity in the face of a lot of record flooding raised $2 million in a really short amount of time. And we were able to keep we were able to support farmers with direct emergency relief payment. From the time a farmer applied for direct relief to have a check in the mail from us, it was 8 days with a half-time bookkeeper. And this year, we're at the State House fighting for a climate resilient farm security fund and more money in local food access programs that benefit all Vermonters, limited income Vermonters, and farmers too. So we need you in our work of building a just future. We are headed there and y'all are all a part of it, and we need you to be with us and join us. And I also want to begin our time together acknowledging the land history here in Vermont. Where are we? We are in the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Abenaki people, on which we're learning, growing, working, and residing. We want to start here to name our shared place in time and space, not as an endpoint, but as a starting opener to a deep conversation. Understanding where we are and how we came to be here now helps us understand what our roles are in repair. We don't want to rush past the painful history and reality of genocide and invisibilization of Native peoples, nor of enslavement that grew our country's agricultural system, built our wealth, and gets us to where we are today. Our mission of a just and thriving food system invites us to consider how we relate to this history and how we steward and live on the land and with each other in this land now known as Vermont. We know that a future where we have a healed food and farming system is not only possible, it's inevitable, because life does life and it heals itself. And we all have critical roles to play as we share resources, build community, swap seeds today, share strategies, stories, and songs. This conference is hopefully going to offer you many meaningful ways and moments to engage and think deeply about your role and our role together in structures of oppression and liberation, and how we can move together. We hope you check out your program to use some of these opportunities to think about how class and power and race and privilege are all in play in agriculture right here in Vermont. And before we move on to welcoming our speakers for the morning, I'm going to offer just a few housekeeping notes and logistics. Throughout the day, you'll see many staff members wearing these light blue conference t-shirts. This is our conference t-shirt. If you have questions and you want to ask someone, you can ask anybody in a blue t-shirt. You can also just say hi, say you want to learn more about NOFA. We also have a few folks taking photos and videos of the conference, and if you don't want your face recorded, if you let any of them know, we can make sure that happens. Or that it doesn't happen, as the case may be. You don't want to be filmed? Sounds like a challenge. In the past, sorry guys. In the past, we will not film you if you do not want to be filmed. I promise. In the past, we have been tight on space in several classrooms, and I just want to assure you we have shifted those classrooms so you're going to have space. Don't worry about it. You can go and not be turned away by the fire marshal. Some of them are slightly longer walks around campus to access larger spaces, so thank you for being understanding if you have to leave the building and navigate through a snowy tundra. That is because we're trying to make sure you can be in the workshop when you get there. And I want to also thank our conference sponsors. This conference would not be possible without their support. We want to especially thank the following sponsors: Meadows Beef Farm, Johnson Family Foundation, Lintillac Foundation, 7 Days, Stonyfield Organic, Vermont Community Foundation, Ambrook, Ben & Jerry's Foundation, Foley Services, Hark, King Arthur Baking Company, New Chapter, Skinny Pancake, and UVM Health Network. Thanks to all these folks organizing their resources to support this moment, as well as all the other sponsors, just huge shout out, and many contributors, the volunteers, the members, the staff, the collaboration that goes into making this conference happen is quite enormous, as you might imagine. So we see you, we see all that work. Thank you for being a part of making this happen. So big shout out to everybody who had a role. And I see that our Senator Peter Welch has entered the chat. And we're so grateful today to be joined by our Senator, Peter Welch, who represents us all. Senator Welch, who every time I call him that, insists on being called Peter, but it still makes me feel deeply uncomfortable. So I will continue to refer to him as Senator Welch, is a Vermonter who really cares about what his constituents need and want. And he has made that clear by deciding to come here in person today to hear directly from you all, the farmers, farm workers, and all the people of Vermont who rely on them to inform the work on the Senate Agricultural Committee in DC right now. And we appreciate you being here. And we're going to hear from Senator Welch in a few minutes. And as this conference is, we think, the largest ag gathering that comes together and brings constituents, we think it's a really important moment to speak directly to your senator, but we are, as almost 1,000 people, it would be a lot if we all try to raise our comments in this moment when we're trying to hear also the keynote. So we have placed some yellow comment cards that are on the seats. There's a stack of them in each row, and there are more by this yellow box. So if you don't have a yellow comment card, you can get one. And it's really important that we all are raising our voices as the people of this place to engage in democratic systems. And a very important part of that, there are many, many modes of making change, and one of them is letting our leadership know what we're in need of, what we're facing. And I do want to say we're incredibly fortunate to have a team representing us in DC that is regularly checking in with us each week, wanting to hear and understand what's going on in the community, and really, I think, deeply wants to hear from us. So please do take the time to write what's going on for you, what you'd like to know, or any comments or support from the farmers of Vermont to the Senate Agricultural Committee. It's an important pipeline. So we're honored to have Senator Aronoff to join us. Senator, you want to come up?
Thank you very much. I really am absolutely delighted to be here, and it's kind of one of the joys of my job that I get to come here pretty much every year and see you and visit with you a little bit. You know, it's a time for a kind of sober assessment of where we are. People ask me, is this as bad as it looks? It's a lot worse. Seriously, I mean, this is what we're contending with. This country has been in a slow-moving, fast accelerating constitutional crisis. It really started with January 6th, 2021, and I was there in the building when the attack happened. I was about 20 feet from where the shot was fired. And what was so significant about that was that these norms that we had taken for granted, each and every one of us, for 250 years, that there would be a peaceful transfer of power in our democracy, and there would be a renunciation of violence as a means of political persuasion to win an election. Those norms were shattered. They were shattered. We did certify the election of President Biden, but this is what's so significant. Donald Trump never acknowledged that he lost. He persisted with the assertion that it was a stolen election. And much to my dismay, many of my colleagues bought into that argument and voted not to certify the election. And you know, we, as a member of Congress, we have no right to argue with the will of the American people who they decided to elect. So me, Bernie, and Becca, when we're down there when it comes to certification, we're just validating what Vermonters decided. We have no right independently to take away your decision about who should be our leader. That stop the steal narrative continued, never renounced by Donald Trump. Now, with the shock that a person who essentially called the violent protesters to Washington, intensified their anger, sent them down to the Capitol for the attack. Then one of his first actions as a new president was to pardon these people who had violently attacked Capitol police officers, had done so much damage in the Capitol, and folks who had significant criminal records, one of whom, after he was pardoned, tried to shoot a cop. One of whom, and there's many others, had a significant record of pedophilia. One of whom who started a dark website where he was selling drugs and also soliciting someone to kill, literally, a competitor. This you can't make up, right? And I'm now there with Bernie and Becca, and a lot of our colleagues are persisting in the stop the steal, it was a stolen election. Now, what happens? Project 2025, which Donald Trump as candidate, never heard of it. Donald Trump as president is aggressively implementing it. And what he's doing right now is lawless. It's lawless. Impounding money that Congress appropriated. That is the Article 1 sole responsibility and authority of Congress. Firing people who have civil service protection, just trampling on their rights. Firing probationary workers, which, by the way it works, there's a veteran preference. A lot of our veterans have federal civil service jobs. They get categories, they've been there for years, but they get categories as probationary out. Interfering with free speech rights of Americans. You can't even use the word equity or diversity to try to continue our efforts to make the American dream possible for everyone. So you have the president who's on a lawless rampage. Now you have a Republican House and Senate. The Speaker of the House, when asked about, do you have any concerns that the president is totally disregarding the budget that you passed, Congress passed? It's not a big deal. So you have a president who is acting outside the constitutional boundaries, a Speaker of the House, and a compliant House, a servile House, that exceeds the responsibility and the authority of that branch of government. And then you have J.D. Vance saying, if the court wants to make an order, fine, let him enforce it. So the next step along the way is if there's a court decision that says a president can't impound funds, and then that's disregarded, we have a full-blown constitutional crisis. So I'm just laying this out because this is real. This is what we're facing. I never believed this could happen. It's like during the attack itself in January 6th, when I was in the gallery and I heard the shot fired. There were people smashing the door down, breaking the glass, and I was scared. But I didn't believe it was happening. Even though it was in front of my very eyes, I didn't believe it was happening. And the reason I didn't believe it is it couldn't be happening. This is the United States of America. And then, when you look at what's happening with Doge, you know, this billionaire who has absolutely no right to be in the White House, parading around with this 4-year-old, who's been given license to go into the Department of the Treasury with a 19-year-old kid, 4 or 5 other geniuses, because they know how to deal with computers. And they're hacking into your personal information and mine. And what they're doing is following through on the Project 2025. And it starts with taking away your free speech rights in organizations. I'm hearing from a lot of folks who are getting calls being told that to scrub offensive language, where that language is about aspiration for a future for all of us, where there are unilateral cuts, despite the fact that there are programs that have been validated and you're in the midst of carrying out the work that you promised to do. And one of the things that's most shocking to me too is, as you know, as farmers, there was in the last couple of years of the Inflation Reduction Act, we actually passed legislation that said farmers, hey, if you do a few things that help reduce carbon emissions, you change the way you're farming. And of course, I'm here with folks who really, this is your life, right? Figuring out how to do this and doing the hard work to make it happen. But oftentimes you've had to do it without any financial support. Well, finally we get smart. Agriculture, farmers have to be a major part of our effort to reduce carbon emissions, which, oh, by the way, according to the Doge folks, doesn't exist, right? But I've talked to farmers where they have entered into contracts. They're going to get reimbursed. They put money up front to do the farm practices that are consistent with the agreement. It's going to help us with carbon. It's going to help regenerate the soil. It's going to do a lot of good things, giving us healthy food that we can eat. And they are being told now by the federal government that, just kidding, we're not going to reimburse you. It's all on hold. There's a cruelty to that. You know, in Vermont, you can't understand it, and there's folks from other places. We're kind of proud of Vermont here. But it's true for all of you. You know, a promise made is a promise kept, right? You just follow through. And if it turns out the promise you made is hard to keep, that is no reason for you to reconsider, do I keep my promise? You do it. You make a promise, you do it. Federal government saying no under Donald Trump. So, you know, as I just talk to you, talk to people around the state and just everyday Vermonters, it's like the stability, that foundational strength that we need to have, some foundation of our feet, has all been disrupted. You know, the norm of the peaceful transfer of power, the president who's talking about continuing after this term, a vice president who's saying that we're not going to pay attention to a Supreme Court ruling. That is the biggest threat in my lifetime to the well-being of our democracy. Now, why is that democracy important? It's important because it's the way we resolve the contentious issues that a society faces, where there's some opportunity for everybody to have a seat at the table. So at the end of the day, you come out and have some satisfaction that you were heard. Hopefully you make some progress, but if you don't win that time, you have a chance to come back and fight another day for what you think is really important. So it is it's a time in my life in politics, my life on this planet, that I've not seen before. Now, we're in the minority in the House, we're in the minority in the Senate. Of course, Trump has the presidency, and he's shown a total disregard for the limits of presidential authority. And what does it mean? We have to fight. We have to stand up. We have to resist. And we also have to be despite our anxieties of what's happening, we have to be accepting and tolerant of one another as we all try to figure out what is it we can do in the place we're in. And it's not immediately clear what tactic is going to work. Capitulation is not on the table, okay? Capitulation is not. I'm seeing signs of resistance starting to occur. Donald Trump won. I do not believe that what he interprets as his mandate is anything close to what the American people want. I don't believe it, okay? I think a major reason he won is he somehow managed to speak to the economic anxiety a lot of people have. That the system's not working for them, that they don't get ahead. And I think us Democrats have to acknowledge places where we came up short. But I also think we have to renew our commitment to what has been a reason I've been a Democrat, and that is because I believe that there should be opportunity for all. I believe that we should be working, and I mean all, Black, white, Latino, LGBTQ. All of us are striving to find a way to live in this world where we can help ourselves and help others and help our community. That's what you all know is what I so admire about you. Leave this earth better than the way you found it. But the two things that gave me some hope that there's in the process of making pushback. One was our first meeting in the Agriculture Committee. We're in the minority this year. My Republican colleagues are all Trump supporters. And to some extent, it's because they wanted to win. To some extent, that part of the Trump message that working folks are not being heard, they agree with. But we had a hearing, and there were two National Farm Organization witnesses. And the question of tariffs came up. That's going to hammer us in Vermont, or Vermont farmers. Well, I was listening to my Republican colleagues, and the questions they were asking were similar to the question I was asking. So I went over and I talked to my Republican colleagues. I didn't say, why are you sticking with Trump? I said, are these tariffs going to hurt your farmers as much as they are my farmers in Vermont? And when we talked about something concrete and the reality of this outrageous policy that the president is pushing, the answer was yes. So this is the work I will do, where it's based on the common interest. Because folks in Vermont, in New York, in Indiana, and even Texas, folks who are doing organic farming, you're not alone here. You've got counterparts in every single part of this country who have a vision that's similar to yours. So my approach here is to advocate for your interest, because your interests, I do believe, are universal. It's not just a niche area that's in New England or the Northeast, okay? There are people that are committed to the soil, to the community, to raising their families in a healthy, wholesome way, just like you. And the second was that god-awful decision by Trump to order his Justice Department, my Justice Department is how he uses it, to dismiss the corruption case against the corrupt New York mayor for political reasons. There wasn't an assessment that there was no factual basis for this case. It was a political deal. And that conservative Republican prosecutor said no. It violates my oath of office. And she stood firm at great risk to her career. Who knows what comes next, but I think she'll be vindicated. I know she's vindicated already. But what I'm starting to see is, as the reality of the unconstitutionality of the Trump conduct as the reality of the cruelty of the Trump conduct, its impact on everyday people, veterans, farmers, that this is creating the reaction we need. So I'm going to continue everything I can to support agriculture, organic agriculture, all the legislation we had last year. I'm going to work across the aisle with people who want to do it because it needs to be done, and it's the way of building up that persistence and reminding us that there's hope for the future. But I do want to just finish by referring, Grace, to something you said. The importance of ritual. And who would better know that than farmers, right? And a ritual that's coordinated with the seasons. But there's also another thing that's really important. Solidarity. Being together. We don't know how it's going to work out. I don't know, I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is that I want to work with people whose hope and willingness to work is to have that outcome be a better America. So thank you all for what you do, and thank you so much for
take a big breath in. And let it out. Let's do that again. Let's put our hands up. Stretch your body to the side. We're in bodies. The sun is shining outside. The snow is beautiful. We're here together. We don't know what is going to happen, y'all. I just want to remind you, does anybody have an ability to see into the future in this room? You may. We may have a few. Luckily, there are keynotes, so you'll be hearing more for them. But we are growing together. We are people who can decide to come together across difference. Come together back to the table, to that feast table that we're laying together, that the earth keeps offering up. The earth keeps saying, this is everybody's home. You're here together. Figure out your bullshit and find ways to live together. Because you're all flourishing together or suffering together. You're growing together or you're dying together. And what we're about is nourishing those seeds of resilience, of community, of deep, deep listening, of making space to be curious about the experiences we're all coming from, because I truly believe, it's going back to that Winona LaDuke idea, that a lot of what we just need is to know that there's going to be a safe world for all of our grandbabies. And I think that's what every grandmother wants. Every grandmother all over the world wants to know that those grandbabies are going to have a joyful life and a very laden feast table. And that's what we're going to move towards. Will this make the earth be able to provide for all of our grandchildren? There's no world in which some of us thrive and others don't. We're going to thrive together. And so even in the dark times, even in the times that feel really, really, really hard, humans have been through times that are really hard before. A friend of mine, when I was overwhelmed with just knowing which way to go a couple weeks ago, said to me, your ancestors did more with less. You have it in your bones to figure out how to find a way through this, how to find a way through all the fracture and division back to each other. We've done this before, many, many times, almost in every generation. And one of the key tools, so it's like turn to those tools of ritual about how do we remember who we are? How do we remember how to be decent together? How do we remember to work together and collaborate and tend this land together? Return to the rituals. And one of the rituals that's the most important in my life is the ritual of singing. And I have been singing monthly with a wonderful group of people who gather at the Burlington Quaker Meeting House. Thank you, Quakers, for hosting us. We just sing songs that tend to our spirits and tend to our hope, and hope in that Seamus Heaney sense that not that we have confidence that we know the way it will work out, but we have muscular hope that there's something worth working for. That's what singing does for me. And my friend Avi Soloway, who I have connected with in that song space, who came to play music there, and Avi is a professional musician. This is what he does, and he comes every month with his guitar and supports us, and more guitar players and harpists and young people who are learning to teach songs, and elders who bring their songs, and people from a lot of different come together. And we're so lucky to have a song that is I think an original song by Avi and a collaborator that has been sung a lot at one of the farms in our membership, Earth Sky Time Farm, which is in Manchester. Has anyone been to Earth Sky Time Farm? Jah provide the bread. And I just want to tell you a tiny bit about Avi before we sing together to move this moment through some ritual, which is going to help us remember how we want to be. So just a teeny bit about Avi is that he is an acclaimed musician, and he's an activist with a life of work around bringing music to change making, to community building. He's worked in Israel, Palestine. He's worked played from Coachella to Carnegie Hall. He's played all over the place. He's the current band leader of Billy Wilder. He used to tour with Bombino, and he uses music, really, I've seen this every month when he just shows up to use music to bring people together. And so we're going to have some music to move together, to grow together. And when I try to start a little clap situation at the end, I'm gonna expect all of you to be clapping. So get ready. You have the words in your program. They're also up here. So this is a moment to sing together and work it through with this ritual.
Hello friends, how's it going? Nice to be here. Yes, so this moment is calling on us. How we respond is up to us. As we face existential threats of political and social and ecological nature, this moment is calling on us to grow, to shapeshift, to change. This moment is calling us to lean into our community and build from the ground up. And this moment is teaching us about our interdependence, our connectedness. And we are all here because we believe in the symbiotic nature of life on Earth. Am I right? Come on. We grow together, we come together, we lift each other up, weaving threads of our shared humanity in these trying times. So this is a song that is evolved through the True Folk process. I first heard it at Earth Sky Time, as Grace mentioned, and I thought it originated there, and then I did a little bit more digging in it. It has a whole life well beyond that farm, and now has taken on many other life forms. I've written a bunch of new lyrics and shared this song in many different circles, and I want to invite you to join the People's Chorus as we sing, "We Shall Lift Each Other Up." So if you're able-bodied, lift yourself up for 1 second. Get a little blood flowing through your body. And I'll teach you the chorus. And there's a call and response after every line as well. The chorus goes, "We shall lift each other up, higher and higher. We shall lift each other up, higher and higher." You want to sing harmony? We shall lift each other up, higher and higher. We shall lift each other up, higher and higher. We shall lift each other up. Ready? We shall lift each other up, higher and higher. Higher and higher. shall lift each other up. Higher and higher, we shall lift each other up. Higher and higher, with our hands we work the land. Higher and higher, we grow good food for all our friends. Higher and higher, bless this earth, she is the one. Higher and higher, our holy mother beneath the sun. Higher, everybody, we shall lift each other up. Higher and higher, we shall lift each other up. Higher and higher, threads of love sewn in the ground. Higher and higher, we grow together, sharing round. Higher and higher, we write our stories and our songs. Higher and higher, rise above and sing along. In harmony now, we shall lift each other up. Higher and higher, we shall lift each other up. Higher and higher. Storms are raging, the waters rise. We change together, open our eyes. The system's burning, we see it clear. We go together, or disappear. Everybody, we shall lift each other up. Higher and higher, we shall lift each other up. Higher and higher, we shall lift each other up. Higher and higher, we shall lift each other up. Higher and higher. Thank you so much. Nice.
Feeling good? Yes, so good to sing. Come to my class at 11 a.m. That's a real invitation. I'm really teaching a song class at 11 a.m. I am delighted to welcome Mike Thresher to the stage. He is our NOFA Vermont board chair. He is a dear heart community leader, dairy farmer, green whisperer, people feeder, community builder, bridge builder, bring everyone to the table kind of guy. And he's going to give some farmers the Spirit of Enid Wanacott Award. So he's going to tell you a little bit about it.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 43rd Annual NOFA Conference. Great opening remarks. Truly top of the heart, for sure. Enid was so delightful. With that, Enid was our executive director of NOFA for over 30 years until 2018. The Spirit of Eden's Wanacott Award is given by our board annually to one or more deserving recipients who embody the qualities that make Enid such a beloved leader in the organic food movement. The criteria for recipients are people who have helped agriculture to flourish in Vermont and are deeply committed to building community and live with joy, kindness, and relationships at the heart of their work. And today we have two folks who we honor. First, Abdullah Marja from Calcon Farm in Barrie, Vermont. Are they here?
They're definitely freezing. Oh,
There they are. The Calcon Farm is a Vermont-based farm with Senegalese roots. And Dulai is a machinist turned farmer who graduated from the UVM Farmer Training Program and with his family, including 3 wonderful small children, has built an abundant and thriving vegetable farm business and community gathering place in Barrie. And Dulai welcomes so many visitors and community members to their farm, and always happy to be a gathering place for youth or anyone in need of beauty and substance. That's awesome. Maria grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on the shores of Lake Superior. Oh, that's wonderful. She followed in the footsteps of her mother, became a nurse. Maria has been working in healthcare for 20 years, currently as a flight nurse at Advocacy. When she's not flying the skies, you can find her in the fields, but after life, and kiddos. And on a recent staff visit to the Calcon Farm, they were so inspired by the perseverance to overcome a variety of barriers to build a bountiful agricultural community in their backyard and with needed like commitment to community, welcoming all into this abundant farm. Congratulations. And the second one is the Baird Farm, Bob Baird. Bob has been making maple syrup on the Baird Farm for as long as he can remember. Bob meets the criteria of the sport perfectly. He's made huge contributions to the maple industry, tends the land with care and love, practices enormous joy and kindness, even with some silliness, and has a centered relationship with his work. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he feels beloved within Vermont's maple and farming communities, to which he is very dedicated. Bob, I saw you. Everybody enjoy the day today and hope to see you around.
You're all on this plaque, which we forgot to hold up. There's a plaque. Okay, here we go. So now we have come to the time we're going to hear the keynote speakers. Oh, thanks for your patience and joy. I mean, every piece is so awesome. And now we get to hear from Dãnia and Tim. I'm so excited. So I'm going to get to talk about them both, and just on the flow, they're each going to talk a little bit about their work, and then we'll have a short conversation here together. So let me start with talking about Dãnia Davy, who is one of the kinds of lawyers we all need. The kind of people who use law to fight for farmers to get and retain access to land, who is ruthlessly committed to people, to all people, to each other, and to the earth. Over the last month or so, with just a very chaotic climate, Dãnia has graciously offered a free space every week for folks to come and ask legal questions, strategies, share struggles, or get clarification. And hundreds of people come. Every time I email her, the first thing that happens is that she immediately sends back a giant heart emoji to just signify that she has received it. And every interaction with her is like this. It's like a small blessing of love, every touch point. On to the professional accolades. She's a founder of Land and Liberation, which is an LLC working towards liberatory relationships between humans, natural and financial resources in the land. She teaches sometimes here in our home state, Vermont Law School. She's a senior policy advisor for the U.S. Southeast region of Oxfam, director of land retention and advocacy at the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, the Land Assistance Fund. She started her legal career as a fellow at the Land Loss Prevention Project. Dãnia earned her JD at the University of Vermont School of Law and her AD in Africana Studies and Community Health at Brown University. Dãnia currently serves on the boards of Agrarian Trust, Farmers Legal Action Group, Southern Rural Development Center, and A Place Matters. She is a badass, and she's here with us today. So let's first clap for Dãnia. Both of these people lead with love. And Tim, every time I talk on the phone to Tim Gibbons, when he signs off, he says, "Love you." And I noticed last night we were having dinner with a bunch of people he'd never met, and the first thing he said is, "I just love you all, I appreciate you all," and he really, really means it. And in a world when so many people interact with each other like a transaction, this lead with love commitment from you both is profound. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Michael Albertson says that whoever owns the land ultimately has the ability to decide the fate of society. And my sense is that both of these folks are people who combine these two questions. How can we imagine a society in which all those who love the land and their community, that is, you farmers who feed us all, truly hold power? What does that look like? Tim has been with the Missouri Rural Crisis Center since 2005, which represents independent family farmers, rural families and their communities concerned with our food supply, our natural resources, and democracy. Tim works to organize a very large membership base of farm families, rural citizens, and other Missourians to challenge industrialization and corporate control of agriculture and the whole democratic process. Through MRCC, thousands of rural people have been empowered by increasing their opportunities to participate in public policy formation and advocate for Missouri independent family farms and rural communities. Their mission is to preserve family farms, to promote stewardship of the land and environmental integrity, and to strive for economic and social justice by building unity and mutual understanding among diverse groups, rural and urban. So we're so delighted to have Tim. Let's give it up for Tim also. And let's welcome you up to the stage, y'all. It's your time.
Howdy, y'all. Nice to meet you. I'm gonna grab a little water if you don't mind. Like Grace said, I'm Tim Gibbons. I'm with the Missouri Rural Crisis Center. We're a statewide farm and rural membership organization. We started out of the farm crisis of the 80s. And like one of my good friends and farmer members says, Tim, the farm crisis of the 80s never ended. And I believe that it's correct about that. I first want to thank y'all and Grace and NOFA Vermont and everybody that was at Shelburne Farms last night. We had a really lovely dinner there. And listening to the conversation that people were having, I really heard how, and listening this morning, I really heard about how intentional the importance of land is to Vermonters. And I just want to echo that for Missourians as well. Yeah, and the importance of community. I mean, I think this is a testament to that in itself. Missouri Rural Crisis Center, we're a membership organization. We have multiple programs. We have a state policy program where we organize at the state level we're an organization of positivity and solutions, but we organize against corporate agriculture. We organize against the Farm Bureau and the Cattle and Pork Association and all the big commodity groups. We're a farm group that that when we walk into Senate and House offices offers a different worldview than our counterparts on the corporate side. At the federal, we work in federal policy as well, so we work on antitrust stuff, we bring farmers into DC, work on farm bill policies, supply management, things like that. We also, in 1993, our organization, our members who raised hogs, started Patchwork Family Farms. So one of our programs is called Patchwork Family Farms. We buy hogs off of our members, we buy them on the hoof, we bring them into small packing plants, and then we distribute local pork in mid-Missouri. At the same time, we started that program, and the reason we started that program was out of necessity, because we saw and our members saw that the market was being stolen from them. At the same time, we were demanding from specifically our federal government that they do something about it, that they enforce antitrust laws, that they stop the ability of packers to own livestock, and stop the multinational and industrial takeover of the hog industry. We had very specific asks, and we said, if you don't do this, this is what's gonna happen. All the farmers are gonna go out of business. They didn't do it, and guess what happened to all the hog farmers? They all went out of business. And I know here, it may not be hogs, but I know here that it's dairy. And a very similar situation is happening across all commodities. The get bigger, get out system that's based upon overproduction, low prices, vertical integration, taking over the market, putting farmers out of business, paying farmers less, charging consumers more. If we were here February of 2024, it would be a very different conversation. We would be talking about, I would be talking about President Biden's executive order on competition and concentration. I'll be talking about flying farmers into DC and talking about the Packers and Stockyards Act, which is the main antitrust division of USDA. I'll be talking about Lena Khan and the Federal Trade Commission. I'll be talking about Jonathan Cantor and the antitrust division of the Department of Justice and how they made mega merger rules that we've been demanding for literally decades. But things have changed, and my work and our work as organizers has changed dramatically. Carolyn Ugar, who's the founding executive director of Farm Aid, on a call with us once said, "Tim, it's the ongoing challenge we all embrace as organizers, and that is why I'm here. This is the challenge that we're embracing. It's challenging to be an organizer right now. It was challenging a year ago to be an organizer. It's even more challenging right now. But what's happening right now is just sort of a natural progression of what has been happening over decades. And Senator Welch said it started January 6th. And it was very funny because Dãnia and I elbowed each other at the same time and said, no, it started with Reagan. And the anti-government rhetoric that we're hearing, and his change, and it's from Robert Bork as well, if you want to get nerdy about antitrust, his change from antitrust being concentration in markets to the consumer welfare standard really effed things up relative to corporate control of our markets, but also the more power corporations get in markets, the more power they have over our democratic process. And the more power they have over our democratic process, the more power they create in markets. This has been going on for a long time. Over the last 4 years, we've had a pretty good opportunity to get our narrative and our worldview and our pivot on the dominant narrative in the media in front of our elected representatives. Now, with what is now termed flood the zone, we've been looking at it for the last 3 weeks saying, this guy won't shut up. Getting our narrative into the news and in front of people's faces has become a lot more difficult, but that's our strategy. That's our challenge and our opportunity. And in large part, we're fighting oftentimes because our media is concentrated as well. We're fighting in their pool. We're fighting in their narrative arena, as opposed to creating our own pool and forcing them to fight based upon our values. Because being a rural organization in Missouri, where our members are very different politically across the political spectrum, when we bring people into the same room and like y'all, and we talk about these issues, everybody's shaking their head yes. So instead, we're fighting this culture war way over here. Not to say that we should be standing up for the diversity that America and people are, but we're fighting this culture war over here while they're saying, look over here, while they take all our money. So it was right. So we have to be very strategic, both idealistic and pragmatic at the same time, which sometimes can be at odds. But I think if we do it from a sense of truth and a sense of our values, we can do it. We just have to think about it. What's happened right now with the defund our government and sort of destroy our government sort of mantra that's going on at the government. It's been going on for a while. It's exponentially speeded up. But one thing I'm not seeing is in the media is when you defund the government and you defund federal programs, who fills that void? That's private interests. When our land grant universities, who we fight a lot because they do the work of corporate bidding a lot too, and we can talk about that if you want to talk offline about that. But when you defund our land grant, the reason why they do corporate bidding is because they're underfunded. And now when we're defunding them further, what fills that void? Private interests. And land grant universities' mission is to do the work for the people. Food and Water Watch did a great report on it in 2012 called Public Research, Private Gain, Corporate Influence over University Agriculture Research. It sounds a little nerdy, it is, but it's really good. But we know we've had bad government, but that doesn't mean that the answer is no government. What it means is the answer to bad government is good government. And that's what we need to be fighting for. Corporations love big government when it works for them, when taxpayers fund the industrial corporate takeover of the livestock industry and our farms and food system in general, but they don't want good government, and that's our job to do that. And working in rural Missouri, when I talk to people that voted for Kamala and people that voted for Trump, and I talk about these issues, we all agree. People agree with this, but there's this dominant narrative that's just battering us, and just a narrative of division. And I know when we come together, we're more similar than we are different. We have similar values. We want our families, our communities, our states, our countries, and our world to succeed. So what we need to do is, instead of talking for people, which I'm sort of doing right now, we need to, but the reason, what I'm saying is coming from, because the first job of organizing is to ask questions and to listen. That's what we need to do. And then we need to reflect that. We do it in our own lane. We do it in agriculture and food policy. But what we know is the same influences that we're fighting is also impacting all of our justice communities, BIPOC communities, LGBTQ+, workers, people with disabilities, Native Americans, the environment, immigrants, healthcare. And when you add all these up, it's all of us. I mean, the vast, vast majority of us out here. But people are beautiful when I look around, and that's what gives me hope, is people like y'all, people like the lovely people sitting next to me right now. If we just fund people, this place would be utopia. And that's what we need to do. We need to organize for that. And we can't just sit here and talk about it. We actually need to get out there and do something about it. People have been really responsive to the work that we're doing together. So how do we get past flood the zone? We need to get in front of people's faces as much as possible. We need to get in people's mailboxes, and your memberships to NOFA allows them to do outside the box sort of thinking about how they can get in touch with people and get in front of people's faces, because the mainstream or the lamestream media isn't doing it for us. When I started working for MRCC in 2005, there were rural papers all over the state. They're all gone. And the ones that are left are owned by Gatehouse Media or USA Today. And they don't have our best interests in mind. And the reporters all got they all got fired, excuse me. I know. I mean, some of the best reporters I know got tapped on the shoulder and said, "You're out of here." So MRCC is an organization that's about fighting like hell. I'm here to fight like hell with y'all. On a call with Grace a couple days ago, in the media and in social media especially, I see a lot of blame going around. It's like, you're stupid, no, you're stupid, no, you're stupid, no, you're stupid. And I don't believe that. I know that's not true. It's not a belief. I know that's not true. And I said, this is systemic, this isn't people-based. I don't blame people, I blame the system. And that's what we're fighting for, is a good system. And Grace said, Tim, we need to be ruthless on the system and kind to people. And that was a perfect way of putting what I've been feeling. Positive change comes from organizing. All major change in the past, hyperbolically speaking, has come from organizing. At 25, when I started this work, I thought it was going to be solved in my lifetime. The naivety of a 25-year-old who got his degree in philosophy. And now at 45, I look back at the people's shoulders, the organizers, both in farm and food movement, but in general, that I'm standing on now, that I've learned from my mentors. And now our goal has to be creating the shoulders for the next generation of organizers to stand on top of, to fight like hell, because if we don't fight like hell, we're gonna lose. And to close, and this is a cliche quote, but I've changed it a little bit. Louis Brandeis, who was a Supreme Court justice back in the 40s, said we can have democracy, we can have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, or we can have democracy, but we can't have both. And I get rid of that word wealth, and I put land. We can have land concentrated into the hands of a few, or we can have democracy, but we can't have both. And I know here in Vermont and across our country, fighting for wealth, fighting for the diversity of wealth, and fighting for people's ability to own land is first and foremost in our fight for representation based upon our values. Thank you, I love you all. Thank you.
So Tim didn't want to go first. We have a long relationship, and I told him that, you know, he's very mindful of being a really good ally. And he said, I don't want to be the white guy, like going up there first and saying, and I said, you know, what we need white guys who are willing to fight like Tim fights. And so I solid allies. Before I start, Grace, I think that, you know, I've been spending a lot of time with the ancestors and indigenous thoughts as I prepare to return to my home of Jamaica this year. And so it's so amazing that we were so in sync about thinking about music, because I also have been thinking about ritual and my culture and the indigenous cultures of this country and my island home. And so the first thing I want to start with, if you're able to stand, please stand. If you're not able to stand, like it's going to be like a little shoulder situation, because we're going to actually dance. And then I'm going to explain what this song represents. But you can go ahead and start the song. Let's go. So like, it's a two-step. Hands up, like, and it's whatever you want, whatever comes to your body. If you're like, just a this and this, if you're like, if you want to get your hips involved, you can do it on your ankles, like, you can twerk, whatever you're thinking, just make sure you're feeling it in your whole body. Like, every part of your body is moving, smiling, like, let's go. Good preparation. I'm also a physical trainer, so if you want to get the workout and get those knees up, let's go, let's go. Yeah. I really tried to be very spirit-led with how I address groups. And this morning, I woke up, and that was the first song that came to my mind. And I think it's because I've been holding a lot of space of all of the other emotions that we need to be feeling right now to keep us, informed about the fascist takeover of our nation, right? Like, we have to be informed. But there's a point where that information is being processed at a rate that's anti-human. And the rate at which we're being expected to process information is at the rate of a machine. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a person driving that is a person who experiences a non-neurotypical way of processing human emotion and thinks that machines should replace human labor, human intellectual property, art. They want to use AI to create art, the expression of our human emotion. So that song, Happy Place by an artist called Lyrical, comes from a tradition of music called soca, which is from the island of Trinidad. I mentioned I'm originally from Jamaica, known for Bob Marley, because everywhere I go around the world and I say I'm from Jamaica, they're like, oh, Bob Marley. There's like either Usain Bolt or Bob Marley. Like they know where I'm from. And reggae has its own history rooted in the Pan-African movement. Yes. So like, I feel like Jamaicans we're very like Christianized. And so our music is very like cerebral, and it's like people know smoke weed and stuff. And like, I'm just saying that there's ways of accessing the divine that we use on my island that are very cerebral. And a couple years ago, I got invited to go to a carnival in Trinidad. And one of the things that I'm a nerd, I'm very admittedly a nerd, and so I wanted to like understand, like I've always heard about this carnival thing, but I really didn't know that the origin story for Trinidad's carnival is the enslaved Africans wanted to have moments. This is a time where there's Mardi Gras, so it's very much connected to the Catholicism and Lent. Because all of the English-speaking Caribbean were very much indoctrinated by Judeo-Christian belief practices. And one of the ways that those enslaved Africans rebelled was through celebration and music. And we dress up in costumes, and there's this party called Juve that starts at 3 o'clock in the morning. And you're like, they're like throwing paint and oil and water, and it's just like everyone's just out in nature, like in an open field, and we're just dancing and we're just celebrating. And it's such a liberatory activity. And then when you trace it back to its origin, it's about liberation, right? And so when I think about the importance of ritual, and I think about the ways in which US culture doesn't necessarily have a unifying ritual outside of white supremacist assimilation. And so that had me thinking about like all of us, almost except for those of you who are indigenous to this particular land, all of us are immigrants. And all of us were gifted to this land, gifted to the land, the human family land, to be in relation to the land. And we had to sacrifice our indigenous connections, our indigenous duties and responsibilities to stewarding the land. And it's so interesting that their strategy is called Flood the Zone, because a lot of indigenous people talk about something that's represented in the Christian Bible, the Great Flood and the Hollow Reed. And so I've really been thinking about this concept of a flood. And you all know better than most the devastation caused by a flood. And I think it's really important for us to think about, what will the world look like after the flood? In the Bible, God put a rainbow in the sky to promise that we'd never experience a water flood. So I was talking to my 10-year-old this week, and I was, saying, this is that moment that our Indigenous ancestors have been preparing us for. In our oral traditions of imparting the wisdom and the knowledge from the ancestors throughout our DNA, right? Like all of our ancestors' experiences, all of the things that they experienced, like they programmed that in little love letters in our Gattaca situations. So we have all of that, and we have access to all of that. And so the work that we're called to do in this moment is to remember that we were made for a time like this. It's been imparted to us how to create joy in a time like this, and to recognize that white supremacist assimilation is an act of violence against all of us, right? And in the same way that toxic masculinity, posits feminism as attack on masculinity, no, like toxic masculinity is harmful. Like I was having a conversation with a cishet friend of mine, and he was saying, like, I don't want to defend you, like, because I work out a lot. Like he's like, you could probably fight, out of a bar fight better than I could. So like the assumption that there's going to be a savior that has a certain physical form, I think it's one that's really a part of the fascist. And because I want to give a spoiler for those who I think should go to Grace's singing workshop, my workshop is about fascism. And so I was spending some time reading Mussolini's writings on fascism. If you haven't read anything that he wrote, like, woo, spoiler alert, you're living it right now. And the other reason I wanted to bring joy into the conversation was one of the goals of fascism is to eliminate the idea that we can be in peace with ourselves and each other so that we're dominated by the state. And I think that we are in this moment where those of you who have European ancestry, when your folks came here, had no backup plan, said they figured out when they got here, right? Like I'm a first generation, so I got here as a young child, thought I'd figure it out when I got here. And you see me, like I came to America in the 80s from Jamaica. Black dad, Chinese mom. It was not awesome back then, by the way. Like just in case you're wondering, like it was really not awesome to be an immigrant in the 80s, in particular from the island of Jamaica, because the United States had dismantled our government so that they could have control over the Caribbean region and keep Cuba oppressed. And my dad recently said to me, if I knew that America was gonna look like Jamaica did when we fled, we could have just stayed there. Like, and so I think that there's so many learnings that we have. And if we allow fear to cause us to not remember our strength, how to reflect out to others, that this is just a repetition on a theme. I think this is our moment. And I think it was really good that I was like a complete outcast when I was little, because it made me a nerd. So like my only friends were books. And so as I kind of close out, because we're gonna get into some more substantive issues about my work, spend some time with some books, because Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower, I reread last year. And she basically, the spoiler alert, is my life story, just so you know. And I've spent a lot of time with all of the Pan-African authors of the 60s, and the words that they were writing back then, they were just a little bit ahead of their time. Marcus Garvey was recently pardoned. He was just a little bit ahead of his time, right? And so folks who want to look within themselves and recognize that the solutions are internal, and capitalism makes us think that solutions are external, that there's a convenient way to package community. Community will never be convenient. Community will never be pre-packaged. It looks like sacrifice. It looks like keeping your word. It looks like, for me, you know, staying at the hospital with friends who are also single people who don't have built-in assumptions about what relationships should look like. It's the really inconvenient work of going to churches where their membership doesn't look like you and striking up conversations. And I don't know why this is the case, but a lot of people feel comfortable just coming up to me in like the grocery store or wherever and asking me my thoughts about stuff. And so I get to fact check what Tim said. Like, I've lived in the South almost my entire life, except that brief stint in Brown. 0 stars on the snow, by the way. But I just want to say that living in the South, living in the places that we live, we see the truth that there's no us versus them as it's played out in the media. The us is us, right? Like, it's all of us, and then there's like the corporate interests that tell us that there's one particular way to look and move through the world that will keep you safe. So I was taught that because I'm Black, Chinese, immigrant, woman, not straight, like, I probably wasn't like knocking it out of the park on the privilege boxes, that Christianity was like that thing that I could like, that's my thing, that's my saving grace. And I think that churches are gonna have to grapple with that now. Like, religious leaders are gonna have to grapple with the us versus them that keeps folks engaged in organized religion. Because that's another thing that has really been co-opted by the state. And so those places where we find inside of ourselves to resist being told who we are, how we look, what we can say, I really want us to spend time in those spaces. I want us to turn on music that makes us feel really good, wake up in the morning and say, what's the best possible gift I could give to this world? And lead with that question.
This work? Okay. I'm learning how to use this kind of microphone. I want to thank you both so much for talking about this, all that you've touched on, which is so mind-expanding, heart-expanding, and connective. But I'm really curious to hear you both think about why farming? You know, we've talked about love, we've talked about division, we've talked about connection to the land and spirit. Why do you work in farming? Why do you work with farmers? Where is the strength that we as the farming community can bring to bear in this moment? You know, what's going on with food and farming?
My answer is really boring, so that's why Dãnia. I grew up in St. Louis. I did not grow up in a farming community on a farm. And like I said, I got my one rule in my house, but I had a really good middle class upbringing. My parents are really sweet, lovely people. And one rule in my house, the one rule in my house that trumped all the other rules was I had to tell the truth. And I didn't know how big of an influence that had in my life because I was a child. And then I went to school, and I was going to go to school for business because that's what I was supposed to do. And I took a philosophy class, like I said before, my freshman year, and then I called my folks, and I'm like, I'm going to get my degree in philosophy. And they're like, no, you're not. And I said, well, what I'll do, I expected that. And I said, what I'll do is I'll go to law school. And they said, okay. And I did go to law school for almost a semester. It sucked. And then I got out of school and I worked in restaurants for a while, and I became friends with this guy named Mark Hine, who was the executive director, still is the executive director of Missouri Peace Works, and he does a lot of social justice work. And I became friends with him, and over a year I asked him if there was a position out there where I could help people. And the fourth time I asked him, he said, well, you know, the Missouri Rural Crisis Center isn't open right now. And I interviewed for it, and I got the job. And it's not a job, it's work. I mean, it's the work that I've been called to do. So really boring, but now I see that, yeah, our lane, like I said, our lane is agriculture and food production, like and rural issues, but we're not just fighting for that. We're fighting for our values and all representation. So that's my long-winded answer, boring answer. Thanks.
I don't think it's boring at all. I learned about African American land loss when I was in law school, and I had the lucky occasion to meet Ben Burkett, who is a Mississippi farmer, co-op leader, continues to be a really trusted mentor in the work. And at the time, what I was interested in was racial inequities of health outcomes. And Ben really explained to me about like the levels of expertise that farmers have, because, you know, they have to understand the weather, they have to understand all of the financial aspects of the work, and they also have to understand like what their community's needs are, because they're the first responders to what meets those communities' needs. And so for me, just appreciating that farmers and those who come from farming backgrounds are alchemists, like land stewards, they're like senseis, teachers, like all of the things to be in relation to the land. I mean, I just grew my first tomatoes ever. I'm very proud of my little 5 tomatoes that I grew, because just to think that you like plant something and you're like, I hope something happens here. Like I even though I come from my ancestors are subsistence farmers and my family is back home, I grew up in Orlando. So like I didn't even know like how any of that works, but just the idea that you like put something in the ground, you care for that soil, you tend the land, you tend the relationships of the community. I feel like that's like the prototype to solving all of the world's problems. And so farmers to me, like, are the way of connecting all of the dots and the broader conversations that we need to have about what the needs are across our communities.
Yeah, thank you. When at NOFA, we talk a lot about how if we can get food and farming right, we get so much else right. And when we get, Wendell Berry talks about how everyone eats, and eating is an agricultural act. So whether you're a farmer, you're a person who's eating 3 times a day, you have a role to play in helping get food and farming right. And so I think that idea that food production, how we tend to land and care for each other, is this most basic human function. How do we tend ourselves on this planet? I know that you've also both worked in a lot of moments bridging a lot of difference in your communities, bringing together people who might feel really differently about a political issue to make wins for farmers. And I'm curious if you have any examples of those moments of solidarity, like case studies of solidarity that you could share about that might bring a little hope to this community.
Yeah, I'll start relatively recently when I was the Director of Land Retention and Advocacy at the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. Really long name when I got it in. So, under the American Rescue Plan Act partially in response to the COVID crisis and the fact that 99% of the farm subsidies and COVID support went into white, mostly corporate farmers, and that's I think our conversation needs to be very clear. I had a reporter recently try to have me create this black-white narrative, but it's really like a corporate versus family farmer conversation that should be had. That said, this American Rescue Plan Act Section 1005 was emergency debt relief for farmers and ranchers of color. And almost immediately after that program was announced, there were lawsuits that are part of what have become the lawsuits that have undermined what we all understand to be this nation's civil rights precedents. And it is really that question of whether or not racial discrimination can be fixed by the litigation process and by legislation, or whether or not we're going to just have to keep having the same conversation about there is no such thing as racial discrimination, right? Because what they're trying to argue is that racial discrimination can go across the power and wealth consolidations in this country, and that's just inaccurate, right? So our understanding is that folks who have historically been discriminated against, divested of by their government, deserve equal opportunity, and they were kind of making a mockery of that with the court process. And ultimately, the Federation filed a motion to intervene on behalf of Black farmers. And in front of one of the most conservative panels in the Third Circuit, we were allowed to enter into that lawsuit to say, no, like to survive the constitutional test, you have to show that their government was involved in the discrimination, and the solution was narrowly tailored. So we were coming in as Black farmers saying, there's a really long-standing history of discrimination against our groups that the government was trying to address, and the court agreed that that is the case and that body of evidence exists. But getting to the point where we were able to be in court as an under-resourced organization really relied heavily on folks like NOFA-Vermont, but in particular the National Family Farm Coalition, which has members all across the country. Their board, who is a white man who was willing to write an op-ed talking about why racial equity matters in our rural communities. That was a really strong showing of support that we received. We had a lot of white farmers that were reaching out, asking how they could amplify the true story about the ways in which our farmers experience discrimination from the government. And so, you know, that's just one of many, many more going further back into this country's history. But we definitely have been really intentional as a movement of integrating solidarity into everything that we do. And so I think the fact that those are the things that are being attempted to be stripped away shows us how effective we have been at building solidarity and coalition. So I think we just take that as a vote of confidence in our abilities to come together and fight together.
Thank you. Sorry to follow her. We just had a board retreat, a 2-day board retreat, and our board is emblematic of rural Missouri. And when we started talking about what we want to do, I've already talked about our bread and butter. The majority of what they wanted to talk about was how do we help immigrants. It was really eye-opening and lovely to hear that, and how we can be allies to that community. That's not only being abused, but it's being politicized at the same time. And I think that's the sadness of the political structure right now, is that people that already have tough lives their lives are being made tougher because of political aspirations. And then secondly, we sent a big survey to farmers. We got 1,300 responses. It was a 4-page survey, and we asked questions about all the policies in their lives and what they wanted to talk about. And it just reinforced the the values and the work that I've been doing and Missouri Rural Crisis Center has been doing and our movement has been doing for decades. We're on the right side of history and people agree with us, and the politics is thinking on the way. So that's what we need to pass.
So I'm aware that our first session starts in 15 minutes, and I want to let people have a moment to move between. But I'm wondering if we could just close, both of you, one of the things that's so lovely about working with you on issues is this leadership with love and this sense of possibility when we tend to that hope together of being loving. And I'm curious if you could share anything that makes you feel some sense of hope, again, back in that sense, not that we know what will come, but that we're committed to doing the work together, because that's actually the work that matters.
I'm gonna answer a different question.
I tried.
Yeah, no, but the question, the answer is the reason I've been able to do this for 20 years is I have the ability to turn it off. And I'm just asking, especially the young people out here that are dealing with really hard shit, to do your best to turn it off and disengage. Like when you're at work and when you're doing this work, do it hard and do it. But when you're not, live. Keep your phone in your friggin' car. Yeah! And go and have a beer with your friends.
I think that's the message we can all get behind. There will be beers with friends at the end of this day at the cheese table. There will also be ice cream. Shout out to Stratford Family Farm. But maybe you have a different answer than beer with friends, but hopefully that's a part of it.
Yeah, I don't drink beer personally, but rum, yes, and all of the others. It's strong stuff. I've been thinking about you all a lot. I have the privilege of getting to come up to Vermont in the summers, and I really think there's something very special and beautiful about Vermont. There's something that reminds me of Jamaica in a way, like when we're like sitting down together, just like conversation, like I feel like there's a lot of spaces where folks are just so busy on their phones that that's like the priority. And so I would say that sharing with others how Vermont does community is a really good idea. And one of the things that I think about a lot in thinking of you all is about in the state of Florida when Indigenous and African peoples decided that they weren't going to be part of that whole thing. Like in Jamaica, we have folks that are Maroons. We're in the constitutional process right now of revising our constitution, which might be something to consider. But I definitely think that looking throughout the history of folks who, can you just imagine, like, I can't imagine languages that are more dissimilar than the Seminole language and some of the like Ghanaian West African languages. And then I think about in my personal life how my great-grandfather moved from Hong Kong to Jamaica, and long story short, I'm here. So people have been figuring out how to talk across really significant language and cultural barriers to create norms that produce amazing results. And so I just want to affirm that tending to those relationships, even when they're not convenient, even when we mess up and we have to ask forgiveness, that's the real work of this moment.
Thanks you all for being here. This is just the beginning of many conversations we can have throughout the day. So I hope you check out the seed swap some seeds, swap some songs, swap some stories, and snacks at the hospitality table. So more to come. Have a wonderful day. We're so glad that this room is completely full, and there's so many good people here to cross-pollinate with. So thank you.